Tweet at Today SOR.
Roddy Doyle is very well known for his prize-winning novels, but when he's not writing, Roddy Doyle is often busy helping students to find their own writing voice in his Fighting Words project. And one group of students has just published a book of short stories, and Edel Coffey has been meeting them and finding out more about Fighting Words. Edel, what is Fighting Words?
Well, yeah, I don't know if people are very aware of this or not, because it's a sort of voluntary project that Roddy Doyle set up just over 5 years ago with Sean Love as well. It was kind of inspired by this thing called 826 National in America, which was set up by the author Dave Eggers. And basically it's just a space to help students of all ages to develop their writing skills. And not only that, to kind of develop their love for writing and to encourage that a little bit in a way that it might not be encouraged, say, in an exam class or in a curriculum. So
youngsters get to spend time with Roddy Doyle and have their work assessed by him?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it's got hundreds of volunteers. I actually volunteered for them years ago when it first set up, and you'd just go along. I used to volunteer on a Saturday morning. You'd go along and there'd be a few kids there. They were mostly teenagers when I was there. But Roddy's there a lot of the time. He's there for the more sort of structured, organised events. They'll do workshops on storytelling or workshops on, how to progress a story or the structure of it. And he's very much there. He's very much involved. And these kids, basically, they were there every week from last September to work on stories, and he would have been there a lot. But it was CBC Monkstown that I went along to last Monday night because they were launching their book, which is called Brainstorms, which they came up with a name for themselves. And it's a great book. It's 25 stories. It's got an introduction by Kevin Barry, who is also involved. So, you can meet anyone at these workshops. There's poets, there's writers, there's former teachers.
So where did these students do their brainstorming? Did they go into Roddy Doyle Centre? They crossed over from the leafy suburb of Monkstown in South Dublin. They went to over near Croke Park.
They did indeed. So the headquarters of Fighting Words is in a place called Bean Square. It's right beside Croke Park there. And they went there every Thursday afternoon since last September, where they'd sit. They'd have the volunteers working with them, encouraging them, helping them with their stories, and basically that's how they came up with them. And they finally got the finished project, which was launched at their school last Monday night, and it was actually a great occasion. They had food and drinks. They had musicians playing. Some of the boys played songs, and Mary Mitchell O'Connor was there. Roddy Doyle was there himself as well, and lots of the volunteers as well. But I spoke to Roddy Doyle. I started by asking him a little bit about why this sort of project is really important to have.
What we tried to do is get across the notion of writing outside of school time, outside of the bell and grading, and where sometimes the value of a piece of work is skewed, and lost sometimes. And actually often there's no room for creativity whatsoever. So it's great. The transition year is wonderful insofar as we have the opportunity to work with kids, and they're not under the same pressure as they will be when they go into the senior cycle. And we almost invite them to change their minds, to go slowly if they want to fill pages as quickly as they can and judge them later, to decide that something they've been working on even for a couple of months isn't exactly what they wanted it to start again. So we give them some of the freedom that they wouldn't get in school, and invariably terrific work comes out of it. I think, an awful lot of writers would be quick to name a teacher or two that had nudged them in the right way, or depending on whether they can make a living or not, the wrong way. So a teacher has a huge influence, and we couldn't do it without at least one teacher who actually has the enthusiasm to find us, but also then has the cop on, or the sensitivity and the confidence to trust the kids and to let them write and not to look over their shoulders all the time. And that's important, so they're involved and they're actively involved, but they're not involved in the traditional sense. As I said, they're not correcting spellings, and they're not, which is has its use, and they're not looking at the grammar, and they're just letting the kids get on with it. And I think in most cases the teachers find it really invigorating as well, and I think they come away with some of the ideas and bring them into their own classrooms.
Roddy Doyle, sounds like he was talking to you there in the school kitchen. particular project, though, that you went out to see, how did that come about?
Well, it came about as the result of a trainee teacher who was working in CBC, and he told the school about Fighting Words because he was a volunteer there. So they found out about it that way, and a teacher called Hugh Fitzmaurice took a group of second years at the time out to Fighting Words just to do one of those workshops that we were talking about earlier, and they absolutely loved it. And then they have this thing in CBC called a teaching revolution, where they have meetings to discuss, new ways of engaging the pupils with learning. And this came up at one of those meetings. And
sounds like a fabulous idea.
Doesn't it? Now listen, I went to CBC from Rockford Manor for physics classes back in the day, and there was no teaching revolution there. But anyway, I wish that there was. It looked like a fabulous sort of setup. But anyway, at this meeting, this came up, and they thought, wouldn't it be great to do a year-long project? Wouldn't it be great if we could, get a book at the end of this? So they went about that, and that's how the transition year students came about it. And he was very interesting because he was talking about how when you're in an all-boys school, it's quite difficult to get boys interested in things like writing and reading because sports is the cool thing. And this has kind of made it a little bit cool in a way. And I started by asking Mr. Fitzmaurice, had the project had an impact on the students' actual performance? Had it improved their writing?
Absolutely. I think just reading their stories, there's such a wide variety of stories, but their imagery has dramatically improved, and their self-belief and confidence is just gone through the roof. That you can see that they take a real joy in writing. I think through talking with the volunteers on a weekly basis, they've got a lot more belief with themselves. They can discuss writing a lot more with adults, and in the classroom it's a lot more engaged, and it's a lot more, like a lot of autonomy was given to the students in Fighting Words, and from that I think there's a real enthusiasm because it's their project, and also I think they learned a lot of patience through the project because they had to learn about the editing process. There was weeks when there was frustration. They thought they had it finished, and then they had to go back and do it again. And I think that's a real skill, a real life skill. And they had to negotiate things with their volunteers, with Roddy Doyle, who checked over their books, with Kevin Barry, who would see their writing. So they learned editing. They learned about the whole idea of patience. And in a world like today, where it's all about now, I think it's great for young people just to learn that process and the joy that comes from it then by staying with it and persisting with it. They could really see that and their confidence developing.
Sorry, I was cutting in there a little earlier, interrupting English teacher Hugh Fitzmaurice. But
never interrupt the teacher, Sean.
Oh, I'd never do that. What about the lads themselves? Did they enjoy it?
Oh, they were fabulous, actually. I got to speak to a good few of them, and they were all really proud, rightfully so, I think, of their stories. And also, I think they kind of didn't believe at the start that they would be able to do it, that they would be able to create a project like this. And actually, it's interesting, in Kevin Barry's introduction to the book, he says that, it can be really hard to write a story, an imaginative story, because you feel embarrassed, or, your Mr. Sensible keeps piping up, and it's hard to let that creative part of your mind take over. But they did, and they were liberated to do so. They were given the autonomy to do so. They weren't given any guidelines, so they had to use their imaginations. But I started off by speaking to, there were two boys there, and they mainly liked it because it wasn't a test and it wasn't an exam and you weren't rated. So I started off talking to Jack Cunningham.
Well, I wasn't a big fan of English before. I found it hard because I'm dyslexic, and so I think the whole process was a great experience, and it's helped me get better at English. I feel like in the past couple of months, I feel I'm getting stronger and stronger as it went on, and it should help for the Leaving Cert.
My story is about this family that get framed for a crime, and they're trying to prove their innocence, but the town don't give them any chance because they don't like them very much. So it's basically about the family trying to prove their innocence. We've written essays for like the junior cert and stuff, but never a full story, and we've never gone through the process of editing and second and third drafts and publishing. So it was a new experience for all of us, I think. It's helped me in description of stories and the building up of characters and the writing settings, but I think it'll help me in particular for essays and the short stories in exams that will be coming up, so it's been a good experience for me.
So that's Owen Vaughan there, finishing that extract from your conversations. We heard a bit there about the story. So what are they like? I'm just looking at the book here. It's a proper book, as they'd say, and a lovely paperback. And Brainstorm, Stories by Transition Year Students from CBC Monkstown Park, Dublin. What did you think of them, the
Well,
stories?
they were great, and it's a really professional product, and you can actually buy it. You can buy it on the Fighting Words website if anyone is interested. But the range of stories is amazing. There were. There was really dark stories, as teenagers will be wont to write. There was a lot of fantasy, actually, which I think reflects what's popular at the moment, things like Game of Thrones. And then there was comedy and a different sort of fantasy. There was a lot of love stories, actually, which was very surprising.
Any of them featuring young girls coming in to study physics from the neighbouring convent or anything like that?
I think that those days are gone, Sean, sadly. But as Roddy Doyle said later that evening when he was making his speech, and he said, there's some young one in Monkstown who is tormenting all of these poor kids. And it's very funny, but they're great. And I mean, I don't even know if they were aware of who Roddy Doyle was. I mean, I was interested to see, did they know how famous these authors were? Did they know that Kevin Barry had won the Impact Award, for example? And because, they wouldn't have been born when Roddy Doyle was winning his Booker Prize in 1993. But I asked Dennis Blinov if he had any idea of the calibre of writers he was working with.
I didn't know who they were, but our teacher told us that he did write in the Leaving Cert, lots of extracts, which I was pretty amazed about. And I did like working with them. They would help out, they'd say how they began starting stories and how their techniques on writing, on how that could help us, different ways of writing. I do find starting stories very difficult. That is the main problem for me. But yeah, once you start and you have a good idea that you're happy to start working with, then you just keep writing. My story is called The Creature of Light and Dark, and it's about this boy who it's like this fantasy adventure where he is trying to find his mother during this very medieval time, dragons and magic and all that. So yeah, it's just his journey to finding his mom. It's just the problem was the ending. I kept on thinking how I could change it. I was never happy with the ending, so I changed it again and again until I finally was sort of happy.
And did he find his mother in the end, or will we have to read it to find out?
Yes, but many problems happen once he does. So.
My name is Jeff Mann. I wrote Murder of the Mind. It's basically kind of a rural, kind of Irish story. It's based in a town called Dalkey, actually where I live. So
very rural.
Yeah, but I kind of introduced a bit of ruralness into it. But it's based in the 1800s, and it's kind of a sinister kind of serial killer kind of thing.
And that was Jeff Mahan there from Transition Year in CBC Monkstown. They're all Radio 1 listeners this morning. Hello, fellas. Good morning to you. Hello, Mr. Fitzmaurice. Sorry for interrupting. But Edel, just to finish, the Transition Year guys there, this project really seems to have helped them. And does it go without saying they got a lot out of it because they had to put in a lot of effort as well?
Yeah, I think it does. And I think that was a really important point that Mr. Fitzmaurice made, was the fact that they had to persist, they had to be patient, they maybe had to stick with it a bit longer than they would have otherwise. But he said it also had a great effect on the personal development of some of the students. He said some of the boys who would have been very inhibited before had really come out of their shells now, and they're starting to visit libraries and stuff, whereas they would have just stayed in the school previously. So it does seem to have helped them in all sorts of different ways. And I mean, Fighting Words, it's all privately funded. It does take, a little bit of investigation to find out about it. But I think if you want to get more information, or if you want to find out about it for your school, just start on the website fightingwords.ie, or you can call them on 01 89 44 576. And remember, it's not just for school children. They do some adult workshops as well. So if you are thinking that you'd like to get into writing and find a way to do it, it could be the place to start.
And now is the time to start thinking about what you'll do in the autumn, isn't it? Because September is the start of the new school year.
Exactly.
If it's transition year.
Future planning, Sean. Future planning. You have to be organised.
It's what it's all about. Edel, thanks for that report. We'll be talking about Dunnes Stores and their abrupt decision to shut the shop in Gorey. That's after the break.
Today with Sean O'Rourke on